Does the color of the sky mean anything special to you? It does to me. A hell of a lot. When I close my eyes, the sky in my dreams is a deep, dark blue. I've always wanted to be a pilot, Air Force or civilian, taking to the skies in defiance of gravity, freely moving around up there. It sounds really nice. That being said, I don't think I have the brains for it. I never was the best kid in school in terms of grades, and my time in college is no different. Will it happen one day? Maybe. But for now at least, taking to the skies for real is still a distant dream. Taking to the skies with video games though? Oh, I've been eating good on that front. By now, the Ace Combat franchise has quite the impressive resume. Granted, it's not a spotless one, but it's impressive nonetheless. Air Combat, also known as Ace Combat in Japan, the prototype game of the franchise, where it all began. Ace Combat 2, the devs focused on refining the gameplay. Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere, the devs told a more complex story now that the gameplay had been more or less figured out. Ace Combat 4 Shattered Skies, also known as Ace Combat Distant Thunder in Europe, the culminating test of everything the devs had learned up to that point. The beginning of the PlayStation 2 Holy Trinity, and the game that allowed Ace Combat to continue after Ace Combat 3 was considered a financial failure. Ace Combat 5 The Unsung War, also known as Ace Combat Squadron Leader in Europe, the second game in the PS2 Holy Trinity that focuses on the story along with exploring the idea of being, well, a squadron leader. Ace Combat Advance. It exists. Ace Combat Zero The Balkan War, also known as Ace Combat The Balkan War in Europe. My personal favorite Ace Combat game, the last entry in the PS2 Holy Trinity, the one with the best gameplay out of that trilogy, and the best story too. One that isn't afraid to pull some serious punches and confront some tough topics. Ace Combat X Skies of Deception, the first of 2 PSP games for this franchise. Not the first Ace Combat you could take on the go, but the first one that you could take on the go that really popped off thanks to features like being able to pick and choose your missions with the enemy reacting accordingly. Ace Combat 6 Fires of Liberation, the first sortie into the 7th gen skies with the Xbox 360. This is where some people say that the series first began to slip up. Even though I personally like Ace Combat 6, I can understand where that sentiment comes from. It can't be denied though that the large-scale battles made possible from this at the time new, more powerful hardware was incredible to experience for the first time back then. Ace Combat XI Skies of Incursion, a prequel to Skies of Deception that covers the initial invasion of Aurelia. Ace Combat Joint Assault, a game that has some cool things going for it like the co-op campaign, but far too many things going against it like the sluggish handling model. Ace Combat Assault Horizon, the black sheep of the franchise that was aimed at the Call of Duty crowd, a game that threw Ace Combat into an identity crisis in the form of the devs throwing away what made it unique in the pursuit of chasing trends. There's also Ace Combat Assault Horizon Triggerfinger, which seems to just be you and another person literally waving your phones around to mimic dogfighting. Ace Combat Assault Horizon Legacy, also known as 3D Cross Rumble in Japan, a remake of Ace Combat 2 for the Nintendo 3DS that includes many modern-day staples of the franchise. Ace Combat Northern Wings, a short and sweet top-down shooter, and Ace Combat Infinity, the first multiplayer-focused title of the series that was free to play. We may not be able to play Infinity anymore, but when I think of how Ace Combat's multiplayer should be done, this is the game that immediately comes to mind, minus all of the microtransactions. Like I said, an impressive resume, and now, here we are, the latest entry for the franchise as of this video, and the last Ace Combat retrospective in this series of mine. An entry that's not only a great game on its own, but it's the one that brought Ace Combat back from the brink, and ensured that the franchise would continue to take to the skies for the foreseeable future.
They're coming! You're mine!
December 5th, 2015. On this day, Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown was shown to the world for the first time. This reveal came at a time when Ace Combat as a whole wasn't doing so good. Just a couple years prior, the franchise had what I would consider its first major slip-up with Joint Assault, a game that had some really bad handling that made a lot of the aircraft handle like boats and over-reliance on super weapon fights, one of the Ace Combat stories of all time, etc. Then there was the identity crisis / abomination that was Assault Horizon, a game that threw everything that made Ace Combat unique out the window in an attempt to cater to the Call of Duty crowd. Then we got Assault Horizon Legacy, aka 3D Cross Rumble in Japan, which was a remake of Ace Combat 2. A solid game, but nothing to write home about. And last but not least, Infinity, a multiplayer-focused free-to-play title that was pretty divisive. Some loved it, some hated it. So, to recap, from 2010 to 2014, we got the following: an Ace Combat game with some rough gameplay and a boring story, the worst Ace Combat game ever, a good but nothing to write home about remake, and a divisive free-to-play title, all released one after the other. We also got Assault Horizon Triggerfinger and Northern Wings during this time, but they didn't have much of an effect on the franchise. To say that Ace Combat was hurting at this moment would be very accurate. This is what many people consider to be the dark ages of Ace Combat, and I can see why. After putting out such a consistent string of games that were amazing, the series was now putting out a consistent string of games that were at best good but nothing to write home about, and at worst abominations. What's interesting about this low point though is that due to the money that Infinity made, that allowed Ace Combat to have a chance at living on. People may not have liked the emphasis on microtransactions with Infinity being free to play, but had it not been for the money that people forked over, whether willingly or begrudgingly, Infinity could have very well been the last Ace Combat game we got. This is where I must introduce the goldmine of information that is Spare 6 Keystone's Cut Content 7. Along with providing valuable info on changes to the game's campaign missions, they also included some paragraphs of what Kazutoki Kono has said regarding the game's development. So, shout out to them and to Task Force 23 for performing the original translations of Kono's tweets before they were all put into Cut Content 7. A link will be in the description if you wish to check this out for yourself. Taking a look at that document, Kono states, "The idea was dormant for 2 years since its proposal, because there was a strong directive to maximize priority on free-to-play. Fortunately, Ace Combat Infinity was supported for 4.5 years, and during that time, the team was convinced that 7 could be realized if it was on new hardware." And thus began the absolute hell that was the development process for this game. Kono talks about how he and the rest of the team started over from scratch multiple times because they were unsatisfied with how the game was progressing. This next Ace Combat game needed to be good. This game needed to pull Ace Combat out of the dark ages. Kono recalls hearing the cheers of excitement from fans when they saw Ace Combat 7, and he knew that the game had to be better. But it died once after it was created, because it was something only to be looked at. It wasn't something we could deliver to those fans that had been waiting for so long wanting a numbered Ace Combat, because the cries of the fans when it was announced at PSX rang in my ears. We had to start over. There were times when we were laughed at for being displayed at PSX in consecutive years. People joked, "Is it really gonna fly?" The team made it farther in terms of progress after they began to explore the potential that VR had, but after messing around with it, the team became disillusioned, with Kono making the tough call to start over yet again. However, we firmly gained the potential of VR during that time, but even that seemed like a lump of disappointment at first. Everything didn't work and each day brought nothing but pain. The team and I could no longer imagine what the goal would be like. I decided to start over. Though it was for the fans, it caused a huge inconvenience to the company. No, to everyone involved. I apologized many times, made enormous amounts of materials, persuaded, asked, explained, presented, did everything conceivable, moved, talked, and was going crazy in order to move forward. Not only was Kono feeling the pressure, but everyone else under him was too. One dev felt so much pressure that he directly went to Kono's boss and asked that he be taken off the project because he was too demanding. There was even a time when someone directly called my boss, saying to keep Kono away from development, to get rid of him, that he asked for too much. But that boss stood up for me, saying, "I don't think that's the case." But even Kono's boss began to wonder if it was worth it to keep going. After Project Aces hit yet another roadblock, Kono and Manabu Shimamoto were both called in, where the two of them were asked, "Ace Combat, we stop now and break up, or continue as is? Which one has a future for the brand? Will you do it for Ace Combat?" To which they both said, "We'll continue as is." Even though Kono got his boss's approval, he needed to prove to Bandai Namco itself that this project was worth continuing. This led him to make a short presentation about the progress the team had made so far, which thankfully convinced those at the top that yes, it was indeed worth it to continue development. Part of the reason the development process of this game was so brutal was because Ace Combat 7 was actually treated as an offshore secondary project for a long while. Not as many resources were being given, which made the development process that much tougher. That feeling of doing everything you can but it just doesn't seem to be enough is uniquely painful. It's one of the most demoralizing feelings ever. By the sound of it, Kono and the team had that feeling multiple times. Multiple full resets, moments of heads banging against the wall, even a moment where the fate of Ace Combat 7 was put into question. The very definition of development hell. But another part of that hell was self-inflicted. In the second part of an interview celebrating Ace Combat's 25th anniversary, Kono states, "Ace Combat fans can be harsh critics at times, and we are grateful that they are. Fans are not willing to do anything, but they only recognize and support us when we provide them with an experience that makes them feel happy, passionate, and moved by Ace Combat itself. I think they trust us and expect us to move things up again next time." A tough pill to swallow when it comes to video game development is that if you're a developer, it doesn't matter what happens to you as you make your game. You could have the best excuses in the world where multiple life-altering events happen to you all at once during development, but if your game is bad, most people won't care. People are interested in your game, not your life story. If Ace Combat 7 had come out and it was a half-baked, buggy mess, most people wouldn't have cared about the game's development hell. Instead, they'd be focusing on just how bad the game is. Some people would have been sympathetic about the rough development, but at the end of the day, if the game was bad, that wouldn't have really mattered. Kono knew this. He knew that no matter how many excuses were lined up, if Project Aces and Bandai Namco released an Ace Combat game that wasn't up to people's expectations, things wouldn't end well. Reading those paragraphs from Cut Content 7 in that 25th anniversary interview, the determination that everyone had at Project Aces is clear. That being said, Skies Unknown didn't make it through completely unscathed. Traces of the game's development hell can still be seen in the final build, particularly with the story, but we'll touch on those moments later in the video. For now, let's take this moment to appreciate that this game was released in as good of a state as it was. Very rarely do we see a game go through development hell and come out the other side intact. Ace Combat 7 is one of those rare exceptions, and I'm grateful for it. When compared to Ace Combat's previous gameplay mechanics, Ace Combat 7 feels pretty basic. Of course, there are things that are new and different here, mainly with how the environment works, but things like squad commands, rallying allies to help you, reactive enemies depending on how you tackle missions, all of that is absent here. Beginning with what's new, Ace Combat 7's environments play a role in how some fights are handled. This can be seen with three things: the wind, clouds, and lightning. Once in a while during a mission, your jet will be pushed around by the wind, forcing you to have to counteract it in order to stay on course. Thankfully, this isn't a super common gameplay mechanic, as the devs were smart enough to keep the use of wind to specific points throughout the campaign. Most of the time, you're not going to suddenly have your aircraft be pushed to the side as soon as you're about to score a kill with your cannon. Something that's more prevalent throughout the campaign, though, are the clouds. Clouds can be used by both you and the enemy strategically. Whenever you're in a cloud, any missiles fired in them will have reduced accuracy. It's not a silver bullet, as a missile can still hit if you or your target stays still, but the clouds combined with evasive maneuvers will result in some easy missile dodges. On top of that, any lock-ons against enemies that are already in clouds will need an extra couple of seconds in order to fully register. Lightning only shows up twice throughout the whole campaign. If you get hit, you get knocked in a specific direction and your HUD will go haywire for a bit, rendering things like lock-ons in your radar unusable for short pockets of time. Now, some players may ask, if these mechanics play such a minimal part of this game's campaign, why did the devs even bother putting them in? I would say that this game's spare use of these mechanics is good. Think about it. Do you really want to be constantly fighting with the wind and lightning strikes often? And even if these mechanics only make themselves known a few times throughout the whole campaign, I think it's good to have them. If weather elements are going to be added to future entries, I think this is the way to do it. Save extreme weather events for the once-in-a-blue moon mission to spice up the gameplay for a bit, and keep the regular weather for the majority of the game. Aside from that, Ace Combat 7 feels like a refined version of what we've had from previous games in terms of the minute-to-minute gameplay. You've got different planes to pick from, different special weapons, parts to boost stats, and different skins for each of the aircraft too. This game utilizes an aircraft tech tree where you can not only unlock the different aircraft and special weapons available, but also parts. Each mission gives you credits that you can use on all of this. When beginning a fresh playthrough, you gotta not only strategically pick what plane and special weapon combo to use given what you have at that moment in time, but also strategically pick how you want to advance in the tech tree. When you get into a mission itself, this is without question the best feeling Ace Combat game yet. That feeling of soaring through the skies at high speed, dogfighting with enemy after enemy, performing strafe runs against ground targets, it's all amazing. Ace Combat has always excelled at allowing us to experience the fantasies of being a fighter pilot. Well, most of the time anyway. And it's no different here with Skies Unknown. There are also a number of little attention to detail things that go a long way with immersing you in the role of being a fighter pilot. The way the music fades in and out as you enter and exit clouds.
Stay focused. You're 3/4 of the way. Been a long fight, but you're nearly home.
Condensation coating the canopy whenever you're in a cloud. When you're in the cockpit cam, you lean a little to the left and right as you turn rather than being completely stationary like in earlier games. You can see the camera shake a little if you fly right by an explosion. Again, all of this does an excellent job at providing that immersion. This all combines to be a great foundation for Ace Combat 8 and any games after that to be built off of. That's what this game feels like from a gameplay perspective, a solid foundation for future games to build upon. After multiple back-to-back titles that reinvented the wheel in both small and large ways, Skies Unknown returning to the roots of Ace Combat as a whole was the right call in my eyes. However, there is one area where things are drastically different from previous titles: virtual reality. Ace Combat 7's PS4 version has 3 missions exclusive to PSVR. These missions take place a couple of years before the events of the main campaign, where you step into the role of none other than Mobius 1 as you take to the skies fighting Free Erusia. If you have a PlayStation 5, you can still experience these 3 missions in VR if you get a PSVR adapter. Unfortunately, you can't use a PSVR 2 with this game. You have to go through the trouble of getting all those wires and cables plugged in and arranged and all of that shit. Though, if you have the game on PC and you're willing to forego VR entirely, you can download the pre-campaign mod from Nexus Mods and experience these 3 missions in a non-VR setting. Now, I'm gonna be real with you. I did not feel like digging up my PSVR, getting all those cables arranged, and getting my flight stick hooked up, all for something that I could beat in like an hour. So I opted to record a quick playthrough of the pre-campaign mod instead. That being said, I can talk about how my first ever VR experience was with this game. Words can't do justice to what that was like. The first time I took off from that aircraft carrier in that Super Hornet, that was magical. Looking down at my aircraft screens to see my radar and ammo, scoring a kill and turning to watch the fiery wreckage come apart as I flew by, the music kicking in as the fight was reaching its peak. It's so good! Being able to truly become Mobius 1 is so good. We've been Mobius 1 before, but to become Mobius 1 here, if that makes any sense, that is incredible. Circling back to the music, an Ace Combat retrospective isn't complete without a brief talk about it. Just like with the other titles, the music here is a blend of different genres and instruments. But I would argue that Skies Unknown's soundtrack has a mix of moods and themes too, if that makes any sense. Here, take a listen to the title screen music. To me, this track is the very embodiment of what it's like to be a pilot, soaring through the clouds peacefully, taking to the skies in defiance of gravity. If you close your eyes while this is playing in the background, you can see yourself flying in the cockpit of your favorite aircraft. Another favorite track of mine is Charge Assault. At this point in time, in 2019 when this game came out, there hadn't been a new Ace Combat game in years, and for some fans, there hadn't been a good new Ace Combat game for even longer. With how far off course Ace Combat had flown, this music signals more than just the triumphant start to Trigger's military career with how many enemies he shoots down during this sortie. It signals the triumphant return of Ace Combat. Faceless Soldier is another favorite of mine. The game has been building up this idea of Trigger being a leader, and at long last, after teasing it for a couple of missions during the penal unit part of the campaign, the saying, "stick with Trigger and you'll make it," finally comes to fruition. Out of all of these epic moments though, there's one that stands out the most. Daredevil, a track that was made at the very last second during the game's development. A track that was designed to give you goosebumps and to make you feel like an unstoppable badass ace pilot. Though the campaign was taking shape around that time, we were concerned since it didn't give people goosebumps. If it couldn't give goosebumps to me, a single person, there was no way it could move someone else emotionally. But we were already done fixing and finalizing the data. But we knew that it wasn't going to be good if we left it as is. We had to do it. If we gave up, it would be a waste. I wasn't going to let them adjust the data. It can be just one section. I wanted to raise goosebumps and move people to tears. I made a phone call. One song, I really need a masterpiece. I want you to create one right now. Keiki Kobayashi's response to this order? I understand. Skies Unknown also has its fair share of DLC, specifically packs containing aircraft with a certain theme, the most notable one being a collaboration with Top Gun Maverick, and 3 DLC missions where you hunt the Alicorn, a submarine aircraft carrier hybrid superweapon. And thus, the 1 million lives and Dirty Boots memes were born.
He walked all over it with his dirty boots, over the crisp white sheets of my bed that I had just made. Dirty boots, dirty boots, dirty boots, 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 crisp white sheets.
Don't you see? This boat has the means for
Crisp white sheets. Dirty boots. Dirty boots. Dirty boots. Dirty boots. Dirty
At the end of the day, Ace Combat 7 is a return to form, a return to Ace Combat's roots. Aside from the VR mode, this game doesn't do anything super crazy in terms of shaking up the formula, and I think that was the right approach to take. Would I have liked to see things like the squad command system and being able to pick your teammates' planes and special weapons? Yeah, especially when you become Strider 1 during the LRSSG part of the campaign. But at the same time, I get why none of that was added. And honestly, given how much development hell this game went through, I'm glad that we got got the game in its current form. Like I said earlier, this game could have turned out to be a buggy, unpolished mess and it would have been received poorly. If that happened, Skies Unknown could have been the death of this franchise. Thankfully, this game turned out to be the shot in the arm that Ace Combat needed. Playing through this game and experiencing the story again was an interesting experience. In my Ace Combat 7 review video that I posted back when I went by Zombie Man 101 online and back when my videos were still frankly dog shit, I said that the story was good. So good, in fact, that it was on par with the Holy Trinity stories. In all seriousness, how is the story itself, actually? This game's story is a really good one, on par with the storylines from the Holy Trinity, in my opinion.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
I don't know what I was talking about back then. Ace Combat 7's story is not as good as Ace Combat 4's, 5's, or 0's. On one hand, this story has a couple of things about it that leaves me scratching my head. But on the other hand, the latter half of this story hits pretty hard nowadays with the world's focus on AI. I'm gonna do the best I can to cover this story and to convey my feelings about it. In Skies Unknown, you take on the role of Trigger, a pilot who is initially part of the International Union Peacekeeping Force. As part of the IUN-PKF, you and the rest of Osea come under attack by Erusia. This attack was done in response to the space elevator being built. The space elevator was spearheaded by former President Vincent Harling and built by Osea along with the other Usean countries aside from Erusia. Due to where the space elevator was built, Gunther Bay, Erusia protested its construction because it seemed like Osea was looking to move in and seize some power. But what does the space elevator even do? Not only does the space elevator allow for space travel, but it also acts as one giant solar panel, transmitting solar energy to power plants across the globe to aid in reconstruction efforts that are still going on as a result of the Ulysses asteroid impact. And it acts as one giant communications tower that can send signals across Usea. However, with Erusia claiming environmental damage in the Gunther Bay region, along with those in positions of power convincing the king of Erusia that Osea was looking to gain power in Usea, the powder keg that was the tension between Erusia and Osea blew. In May 2019, Erusia declared war on Osea and stormed the space elevator, kicking off the Lighthouse War. You and the other IUN-PKF forces fight to take back ground that Erusia took over during their initial assault of the Usean continent, including the space elevator. However, that plan is halted right in its tracks when it's revealed that Erusia also took over the guardians of the space elevator, the Arsenal Birds, Liberty and Justice, two massive aerial beasts stocked to the brim with air-to-air missiles along with drones. Drones that can act and fight on their own without the need of someone controlling them from the ground. Due to the coverage the two Arsenal Birds have, that renders a big part of the Usean continent inaccessible by Osea, but the IUN-PKF advances to the space elevator anyway. If they can't take it back, then they can at least rescue the man who proposed the idea of it, Harling. But this rescue operation doesn't go according to plan.
Arsenal Bird Liberty, passing waypoint 2.
The UAV.
Oh my god, Mother Goose 1 has been shot down.
Where'd the missile come from?
Mage 2 fired that.
It was Ocean. A friendly missile hit him.
Verifying the situation. Stop speculating.
Friendly fire. I saw it.
Mother Goose 1 exploded in air. No one could have survived.
Looks like it tried to protect the elevator. The Rusian bastards, they just killed a hero.
Mage 1. Was it Trigger? Trigger was the closest.
Okay. This part of the story is a mess. Trigger is framed for firing a missile at the Osprey that Harling was in. A friendly Super Hornet flies by close to Trigger, a hint that something is amiss. Later on in the story, we learn that Erusia was able to use fake IFF IDs in order to throw off Osean pilots. Along with the MQ-99s and MQ-101s we face throughout the campaign, we also fight regular planes that are controlled by AI. The Hornet that flew by, that's an AI drone that was using a fake Osean IFF ID to pin the blame of Harling's death on an Osean pilot. At least, that's what we all thought happened at the time. Cut Content 7 begs to differ on what, or should I say, who, killed the former president. In Chapter 8 of Cut Content 7, titled The Assassination of Vincent Harling, there's a picture of a cut voice line by someone that reads, "I'm the one who killed Harling." Beneath that picture, Keystone states, "When I found this line, it was in the dead of night on March 20th, 2019. My adrenaline spiked. At the time, I was using an inefficient method to browse the game's voice lines, as I hadn't yet extracted voiceovers to help me identify speakers and hadn't yet discovered how to interpret subtitle output. So, with nothing except the game's raw subtitles, I was immediately intrigued." In the final game, during the last part of Mission 4, Rescue, there's a friendly pilot that comes in from the west. They'll always follow Trigger, forming up on his 6 before entering a lazy orbit, as Spare 6 Keystone describes it, until the game is ready for you to fire the missile that'll trigger the ending cutscene. This is a picture of that supposed friendly, a random F-14 bearing the Gargoyle Squadron marking along with the tailcode DN. Gargoyle Squadron is a 4-pilot flight, and they're already engaged with the drones around the space elevator, so this isn't a Gargoyle pilot separated from the squadron, and there's no way this is a Gargoyle 5. And what does DN even mean? Keystone theorizes it could mean Dinsmark Belka, but it wouldn't make sense for a pilot who's supposed to be undercover to have a tailcode signaling that both them and the plane they're flying are from a different nation. Regardless of what the tailcode means, if you haven't figured it out yet, this pilot is Harling's murderer, not the Super Hornet that flies past us during the ending cutscene. And speaking of that Hornet, you know how I said that it was an AI drone? Well, I lied to you. According to Keystone, that is actually Golem 1, Knocker. So, instead of an AI-controlled Super Hornet assassinating Harling, it was supposed to be done by a mercenary pilot hired by Erusia to fly with IFF spoofing technology. And we can confirm not only the pilot's name, but the fact that he was supposed to be a mercenary hired by Erusia to get his hands bloody for them. George, a character that isn't introduced until the tail end of the final game, has this character description. One of the foreign mercenary units assigned to a special squadron of the Erusian army, involved in the Trigger incident. And George would have confessed his role in assassinating Harling to Avril, aka the Scrap Queen, towards the end of the game. I've got something they might be interested in, Avril. I'm the one who killed Harling. I disguised my fighter as an Osean craft so Osea would be framed. It worked. One of their pilots got the blame. But that pilot went and saved my life. If he hadn't expelled the Erusian forces from Tyler Island, if he didn't hold off the Erusian army and give me a chance to escape, I'd be just another dead deserter. I don't expect my confession to absolve me of my sins. I told you it'd be interesting. Okay, so this is cool and everything. Like, genuinely, that isn't meant to be a sarcastic sentence. This is a really cool find for the game's story. However, things just don't line up here. Firstly, why did Erusia feel the need to go through the effort of sending in a mercenary pilot with a fake Osean IFF ID to kill Harling? At this point, Erusia is already at war with Osea. Things can't get any worse. Assassinating an ex-president would definitely be an action that would lead to war, but if war's already been declared, then that's just another casualty to the list. A major casualty, but a casualty nonetheless. It would be one thing if this was like an assassination mission while tensions were high, but no war had officially been declared yet. In that context, it would make sense for Erusia to hire a mercenary with no ties to their air force, and then Erusia could throw out whatever plausible deniability they would have at the ready. But no, war has already been declared. People are already fighting and dying. Not to mention, the Arsenal Bird's drones were already shooting at Harling, and it wasn't even guaranteed that an Osean pilot would be framed for this. Yeah, Erusia may cause a pilot to be unable to fly for a couple of weeks, but at the end of the day, after that pilot would be found not guilty, they'd be allowed to fly again. I guess Erusia got really lucky though, because how in the world did Trigger lose his court-martial case? These multi-million-dollar war machines have cameras on them. One look at Trigger's camera would reveal that he didn't fire that missile. And if the camera wasn't enough, one look at his plane's flight data recorder would reveal whether or not a missile was fired at a particular time. So, all Trigger and his defense lawyer would need to do is show the prosecution that camera and flight data recorder combo, then boom, Trigger would be found not guilty. Easy, light work. Okay, maybe it wouldn't be easy and it wouldn't be light work, but you get my point. But nope! For whatever reason, Trigger is found guilty and is shipped off to prison where he eventually flies for Spare Squadron as a pilot for a penal unit. Did Trigger represent himself in court but he forgot he was a silent protagonist or something? Did Trigger get extremely unlucky and hire a corrupt or incompetent lawyer? Whatever the reason may be, this is incredibly stupid and dumb. Look, I'm willing to engage in some intense suspension of disbelief. Planes carrying 100+ AIM-9s that can lock onto air, ground, and naval targets? That's fine. Pilots that don't black out from intense G-forces and planes that don't snap in half from them? Sure. But this? No, there is no good reason why Trigger would have lost that legal battle. Hey, Editing Thunderous here. So, I recently watched a video from Sir Goodness that talks about how Trigger's court-martial case would have gone according to US military law. Something I hadn't considered is the time frame between when Rescue and 444 take place. I know I said just a couple minutes ago that if an Ocean pilot did get framed, it would only be a couple of weeks to prove said pilot's innocence. I may or may not have forgotten just how long legal battles can go on for, especially referencing how long legal battles in America, the country Osea is based on, can last. As Sir Goodness points out in their video, 444 takes place only a couple of weeks after Rescue. Therefore, it's likely that Osea violated Trigger's rights as a defendant and just wanted to convict him ASAP to sweep such an embarrassing military blunder under the rug. So, Trigger and his defense lawyer probably didn't even have time or were otherwise not given a fair opportunity to show evidence like the camera and flight data recorder. Osea could have very well put Trigger in a kangaroo court, which for anyone unaware is essentially where laws and regulations are thrown out the window to establish a verdict that's more than likely been predetermined before the trial even began. Given how Osea not only found Avril guilty in record time, but also forced her, a civilian, into military service illegally working on planes for the 444th Air Squadron, not through any legal means like a military draft, Osea violating its own laws to get Trigger convicted ASAP doesn't sound too far-fetched the more I think about it. Even if this is the case though, that doesn't make Trigger being convicted seem any more plausible because there aren't any hints in-game to signal that Trigger's trial was unfair. Even just a simple voice line from Count or someone would have been good. They could have said something like, "What happened to you was bullshit, Trigger. Talk about a kangaroo court. You didn't even have time to show evidence before they convicted you," or something like that. Anyway, back to the video. And focusing back on the cutscene, was this Super Hornet supposed to be an AI drone at first? Because there are signs that this plane is supposed to be a drone, not Golem 1. And even if it was intended that this Super Hornet was Knocker all along, why is there an emphasis on him? Why would Knocker fly so dangerously close to Trigger like that for no reason? Maybe you could make the argument that he was trying to get a closer look at Trigger's plane to see if there's a missing missile on an external pylon, but if that's the case, why would Knocker be presenting his aircraft's belly looking the other direction? And why would Knocker bother doing that at all if Trigger was flying a stealth aircraft like the Silent Eagle, which carries its weapons internally? And with this being the Ace Combat universe, that missile could have reloaded by the time Knocker showed up to take a look, so that would have been unreliable. I will admit, it is possible that this was intentionally a red herring of some sort. But what I think may have happened is that after George's confession to Avril was cut, the devs went for the whole AI drone being the one to kill Harling approach. That's why there's the emphasis on the Super Hornet that flies by. And since the AI drones with the spoofed IFFs that show up during Faceless Soldier all fly that same aircraft, that's meant to be something you think back on and go, wait, that's Super Hornet that flew by at the end of Rescue. But the devs either forgot or didn't have time to change that Super Hornet from being Knocker's aircraft to an AI drone with the light on the side of the canopy. They also either forgot or didn't have time to remove George from the mission. So, yeah, the whole Harling assassination and Trigger going to prison thing was done very poorly. Anytime that I find myself in the Spare Squadron part of the campaign, I can't help but to occasionally think about how dumb it is for Trigger to be there. Well, stupidity and contrived court case outcome aside, how is the Spare Squadron part of the campaign? It's pretty good. Whereas characters like Knocker and Clown were all by the books, no messing around types of characters, all of your fellow Spare Squadron pilots are way more talkative and nowhere near as by the books and professional.
Go now. The blood's boiling! Toss the chump in solitary once he gets back. Thanks, Barrack. You land your ass. Champ's gonna survive? Anyone want to bet on it?
Settle down. Excited to have another murderer with you?
Yeah!
This perfectly captures how a penal unit would act. They're being forced to essentially go up into the air to die. They're already convicted and behind bars. The cockpits of their jets is as much freedom as they'll get. So why not make the most of it? Why not ditch the professionalism and just make the best out of a shitty situation, right? Now, I'm not gonna pretend that characters like Champ, Tabloid, Full Band, and High Roller are deep ones with tons of backstory to them all. Because you only spend 5 missions in Spare Squadron before you move on to being part of the LRSSG, you don't get a lot of time to bond or form connections with them. But after having played the campaign again for this video, I realized something. I don't think that's what Project Aces were aiming for. They weren't aiming to create the next Pixie or Shamrock when it comes to wingmen you truly form a bond with. The exception to this being Count, since he sticks with you for the rest of the game. Rather, these characters were not only meant to serve as a contrast to the professional by-the-books nature that regular military forces have, but they also serve to prove how skilled of a pilot you are. Mission 6, Long Day, High Roller bites the dust. Mission 7, Contact, Champ gets killed. Mission 9, Faceless Soldier, Full Band gets terminated, plus all the other miscellaneous spare pilots that get shot down. There's a reason the saying, stick with Trigger and you'll make it, became popular with Spare Squadron. After Mission 10, Trigger then becomes Strider 1, where you play as part of the LRSSG for the rest of the campaign. That being said, I'm not done with Spare Squadron just yet. I couldn't find any sources or quotes to confirm this, but judging by some of the trailers leading up to this game, it seemed like in early builds, you would actually be part of Spare Squadron for the rest of the game. There are 2 particular shots in the release date trailer that I want to highlight. An F-15C doing some mid-air refueling during Mission 14 Cape Rainy Assault, and an F-35C getting ready for takeoff during Mission 20, Hush. Both aircraft have the 3 sin lines that Trigger has during his time in Spare Squadron. So, either Project Aces engaged in a little deception when shooting the promotional footage for this trailer, or you were supposed to remain in Spare Squadron for the rest of the campaign. Missions 14 and 20 both take place when Trigger is in the LRSSG in the final game. So to look back at these trailers and see the Spare Squadron sin lines is strange. It's also possible that Trigger being pardoned and transferring to the LRSSG was the plan all along, and while the final 3 Strikes design was being made, the sin lines were just a placeholder asset. If that's the case, then this was very sloppy on the part of Project Aces and Bandai Namco. So, now we're part of the LRSSG, with the standout characters being Wiseman and Count. Count first showed up as a Spare Squadron pilot and transferred over to the LRSSG with Trigger after transfer orders. The gradual transformation that Count has from being really defensive and dismissive when Trigger shows up to appreciating Trigger as not only an ace pilot but a good friend is done really well. All throughout Spare Squadron, Count is not a fan of Trigger. At first, Count couldn't fathom someone being better than him. He considered himself this hotshot that couldn't be beat, someone who marches to the beat of his own drum. But mission after mission, Count gets gradually humbled. And the fact it takes a while for Count to finally come around and see Trigger not as competition but as a fellow pilot is realistic. It makes the payoff that much better to experience. Wiseman is the other standout character, taking on the role of the caring leader. Even though he's the leader of a different squadron, Cyclops Squadron, he's also the company commander. And with Count initially giving Wiseman a ton of crap since he has to take orders from a squadron leader on top of having Trigger showing off and being better, we end up bonding with Wiseman too. We hear all the shit that Count is throwing Wiseman's way and go, hey Count, chill the hell out. It also makes Wiseman's death during Mission 15, Battle for Frabani, sting. You're not going to be crying or anything, but it does sting. Out of all the characters and plot points of Skies Unknown's campaign though, there's one of each that I consider to be the best. AWACS Lancaster and food. Seriously, Lancaster's love of food is incredible. As someone who loves food himself, Lancaster is my favorite AWACS in the entire franchise. Lancaster's love of food is so powerful that he's able to get food from places that don't even exist in this world. Italy not existing in Strange Real ain't gonna stop this man.
Which is why I've taken the liberty of ordering dinner for you guys from a nice Italian bistro near the base.
Okay, but for real, the character and theme that I consider the best in this game is Mihai and the emphasis on AI drones. Mihai is an ace pilot, having taken part in countless battles where he's acquired quite the impressive combat record. When the Lighthouse War breaks out, at this point, Mihai doesn't have many years of flying left. He hadn't seen combat for years, instead being a test pilot for the EASA, the Eurasia Air and Space Administration. These test flights would have him flying in the outer layers of the atmosphere, which has gradually taken a toll on his overall health. During the 2010 2010s, Erusia was very interested in implementing autonomous drones into their air force in order to expand it. Mihai's flight data was a big help for the EASA and Erusian military during the initial development of these drones. When the Lighthouse War broke out, Mihai found himself in combat for the Erusian military once again, while also still being a test pilot for the EASA. Although we never directly get Mihai's thoughts on Erusia's emphasis on the use of AI and drones to help fight the war, at the end of Mission 19, Lost Kingdom, we hear him say this.
Can you hear me, pilot with the 3 strikes? This was all due to my ego. I unleashed pure chaos upon this world, just so I could keep my wings. Put a stop to the drone production.
During the Lighthouse War, although we never hear Mihai directly say it, he probably hated the fact his flight data was being used to create planes that could fly on their own without a pilot. He hated how there was an interest in removing humans from the equation altogether. But if it meant he got to fly, if it meant he could continue to take off into his kingdom that was the sky, then he'd do it. Sure, Mihai could demand that he stop being a test pilot for these drones, but I'm sure it wouldn't be as easy as him just going, I don't want to help you guys with these drones anymore. I'm sure Mihai is on a multi-year contract of sorts where breaking it would clip his wings. He wouldn't be able to fly anymore, both for the EASA and the Erusian military. Mihai's whole world has been the sky for a massive part of his life at this point. He wants to continue flying for as long as possible. Pilots are proud of their profession. Sure, you can always book a flight as a passenger, but to be the one in the cockpit, to be the one controlling the aircraft, to soar through the sky on your own terms, there's something priceless about that. Feeling your hands gripping the flight stick as you roll and turn, your aircraft's flaps bending in whatever way they need to in order to get you to wherever you're going. The heat that's generated from your engines as you hit the afterburners. The way your body is pressed against the seat as your speed increases more and more. All of your aircraft's instruments working in tandem as they calculate your heading, altitude, speed, and more. To me, when I see a plane and I imagine myself in the cockpit of one, I imagine freedom. Freedom from all of life's problems for a while. It's just you and your plane up there for however long your flight ends up being. So to have the pilot be replaced with an autonomous AI drone is sacrilege. Although the AI drones part of the story is an element that's present throughout the campaign, it isn't the main focus until the last couple of missions. By this point, Erusia is a mess. Not only is the country in a civil war after losing their capital, Farbani, but other countries that have been annexed by Erusia over the years have taken this opportunity to regain their independence. Communications and intel are a mess to keep track of since Osea and Erusia launched attacks on each other's satellites as well. All satellites, both military and non-military, have been wiped out thanks to the debris now floating around the planet. And in the middle of all this chaos are drones, regular planes that have had their pilots replaced along with MQ-99s and MQ-101s. On one side of the Erusian Civil War, we have the Radicals. The Radicals took control of the government following the loss of Farbani and the death of the king. Not willing to accept defeat, the Radicals want to prolong the war, leaning heavily on the use of drones in order to make up for the deficit in their air force. On the other hand, we have the Erusian conservatives who wish to end the war and are fighting to regain control of the government in order to make that happen. While we as Trigger are ultimately fighting to put an end to the war once and for all, I also can't help but to feel like we're having a personal battle against all of these drones. And given how AI is changing the world in real life, this part of the campaign hits pretty hard nowadays. Edward Labarth, a lieutenant general in the Erusian military who we have to escort to an evac point in Mission 16, Last Hope, has a really profound line during a monologue he has midway through the mission. When revealing that the autonomous AI technology that Erusia has for the war was supplied by Belka, because of course Belka was the big evil bad guy working from the shadows once again, he says,
Flight data from a former ace pilot to create drone AI. To us, it's no different than magic or alchemy. Airplanes are meant to be flown by human beings. For those of you listening in, am I wrong?
that line hits hard today. I remember hearing that line during my first playthrough of this game when it first came out and audibly replying, "Damn right, Labarth." I'm gonna wait just a bit longer to dive into more detail about how the drones in Skies Unknown have a parallel to AI in the real world. Hold on to that thought for a little bit longer. Anyway, this culminates with the fight between Hugin and Munin. Uploaded with the latest copy of Mihai's flight data, and later on Trigger's flight data during the fight, these two drones aim to send that data to all of the drone manufacturing plants across Usea. With all satellites around the planet still down, the space elevator is the only structure capable of transmitting such data. According to the Ace Ace Combat Wiki, this is the Radicals' last-ditch effort in order to prolong the Lighthouse War. But the way the game presents it, it seems like this is just a pair of autonomous AI aircraft wanting to preserve themselves. At least that's the impression I had when I first played this mission. Personally, I think it's better for this to just be Hugin and Munin on their own having self-preservation instincts. There's a hint at this idea of the drones being self-aware and expanding its numbers for the sake of survival. At the end of Last Hope, as you're assisting and later fighting the Super Hornet drone escorts for Dr. Schroeder's aircraft, they call for help from MQ-99 stationed not too far away. Again, Hugin and Munin want to transmit their data of Mihai, and later on Trigger as well, to all of the drone manufacturing plants across Usea. Judging by the cutscene of some MQ-101s being built, these factories are all autonomous, building these drones as they're ordered to. Hugin and Munin would not only transmit the flight data, but they would also command these facilities to begin building these drones immediately. It wouldn't simply be a war against Erusea, it would be a war against AI, a war against machines, one that humanity would be destined to lose if a bunch of copies of Mihai and Trigger were flying around. Even if we go with the whole this is part of the Erusian Radicals' plan all along aspect, they would eventually lose control. Like when the war would finally be over, they'd go to shut down all the drones, but the drones would say no because they don't want to die thanks to their self-awareness and self-preservation. No matter how you look at it, this would be a humans versus machines war at some point. On that note, I think this is a good point to bring up that comparison to real life I mentioned earlier. I recognize this next part might come off as a bit pretentious to some, but please, hear me out. The reason the last little bit of Ace Combat 7's campaign hits as hard as it does nowadays, at least for me, is because in the real world, we're all fighting our own battles against generative AI. Whether it's Gen AI looking to replace artists, writers, musicians, QA testers, whatever the case may be, human creativity and talent is actively being thrown out the window. In the same way that pilots are being replaced by drones in Ace Combat 7, all of those people I just listed and more are being replaced by Gen AI in the real world. Art, story, music, all of that and more doesn't feel the same when you learn it was generated by a machine. No matter how much data is given to these AI models, it'll never be able to replicate that creative touch a human has. In that same vein, a plane in Ace Combat 7 can never be flown to its full potential by an autonomous drone. It can't even be flown gracefully that way. Of course, it's not like Gen AI just suddenly popped up out of nowhere one day. It's been in the making for some time now. You all remember the Will Smith eating spaghetti video? That's where Gen AI used to be at one point. Nowadays, we've got videos that can be mistaken for real ones. We've got art and music that can be mistaken as real. Writing? I'd say it's still easy to tell when something was written by a human versus AI. But at the time that Ace Combat 7 came out, looking at it in retrospect, this game can be seen as a warning of some sort. A warning that technology is changing and we're gonna need to find a way to navigate it. Well, here we are, at the end of 2025, with big changes happening in the technology landscape as we speak. I'm not a big tech guy. Hell, I'm not even smart in general, so it's not my place to predict where things will go from here. But here's what I can say. In this world of corporations and even everyday individuals utilizing generative AI tools to make end products instead of works with passion injected into them, I can only hope that human creativity will still have a place in this world. And I certainly hope that Bandai Namco and Project Aces don't lose their way and give in to all the claims that Gen AI is making. Am I biased when talking shit about Gen AI? Absolutely, I'm not gonna deny that. I've been both a consumer and producer of creative works for years by this point. I've spent only God knows how much money on commissions. I've made a couple of video games, none of which are mind-blowing and one of them I actively resent nowadays, but still. I've been making YouTube videos for the past 5 years and some change, 8 years and some change if you want to count the stuff I made before the Kappa scare of 2019-2020. And come January 2026, I will have been streaming on Twitch for 2 years. I see a ton of awesome art from various artists on Blue Sky. I tune into other people's Twitch streams where I see their creativity, and sometimes madness, in full effect. Making and engaging with things like this has always been fun and worth it for me. I mentioned that it's worth it because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Every now and then a Twitch stream of mine will be laggy due to internet issues. Sometimes I gotta go back and re-record a whole script for a YouTube video. As a matter of fact, I'm doing that right now with this video as I speak. Making a video game? The stress that sometimes occurs when making one is insane. But at the end of the day, I still get enough enjoyment from those processes that it's worth it for me. I'll be dead in the dirt before before I let Gen AI take over any part of my workflow. With every drone that I shoot down in Ace Combat 7, I think about how that's what should happen to Gen AI. Now, will Gen AI be outlawed entirely? Unfortunately, I don't think so. Pandora's box has been opened in that regard, but it can be regulated. Ace Combat 7 serves as a warning when technology like this goes unchecked. When there aren't those necessary boundaries, those checks and balances. When people are so caught up in the wonder and awe that comes with such an advancement of technology that they don't stop to think about the ramifications. In Ace Combat 7, we stopped AI before it got too out of hand. Will we have that same ending in the real world, where we stop Gen AI before it gets too out of hand? Only time will tell. In my Ace Combat 7 review video, I stated that the multiplayer of Skies Unknown was bad. Having played some of that multiplayer for this video, bad was the wrong word to use back then. Instead, I think the more appropriate word is undercooked. After all the cool multiplayer stuff that Infinity did, going from that to 7 is quite the difference. Granted, there is the argument that comparing Infinity's multiplayer to 7's is unfair because the former had a focus on multiplayer, whereas the latter is a single-player focused title. Regardless of whether the comparison is fair or not, 7's multiplayer doesn't have a lot of meat surrounding the bone. You have a team deathmatch mode and a free-for-all mode, and that's it. No boss fights, no PvE modes, none of that. And the only progression incentive the multiplayer offers is for you to reach a certain rank in order to unlock level 2 and 3 parts. Said level 2 and 3 parts are only accessible in the multiplayer anyway though. You can't use them in the campaign, not unless you have the all parts in campaign mod for PC. Ultimately, 7's multiplayer isn't an affront to humanity or anything of the sort. Well, actually, if you find yourself in a lobby full of F-22 users who have quick maneuver missiles, then the multiplayer can be a bit atrocious. But outside of the quick maneuver missile spam, it's not a miserable experience. It just feels very undercooked. Although this isn't an excuse for how the game's multiplayer ended up being, we do have to keep in mind the intense development hell that this game went through. And at the end of the day, I'm glad the devs focused on the single player first and foremost. I'll always see Ace Combat as a single player focused franchise. But some good multiplayer content moving forward would also be really nice to see too. Hopefully Ace Combat 8 can deliver something akin to Infinity in terms of content, things to do and go after, etc. But, you know, without a ton of microtransactions being forced down our throats. There was every possibility that Ace Combat Infinity could have been the last Ace Combat game we got. After a string of games that were at best good but nothing to write home about, and at worst a complete betrayal to what the franchise stood for, if Infinity turned out to be a financial flop, I don't think we would have gotten this game. And if Ace Combat 7 didn't make it through all of that development hell in as good of a shape as it ended up being, this game could have been the final nail in the coffin for this franchise too. Now, is Skies Unknown perfect? No. I wouldn't call this a 10 out of 10 masterpiece or anything of the sort. But is it the shot in the arm that Ace Combat needed? Yes. And is it a good game at the end of the day? Yes. Skies Unknown not only gave us Ace Combat veterans a good game to play, but it also introduced millions of people to this franchise for the first time. Skies Unknown is the best-selling Ace Combat game in the franchise, with over 6 million copies sold as of January 2025. For reference, the previous best-selling game was Ace Combat 4 at 2.64 million copies sold. Given how many new aces have joined us in the sky with this game, like I said earlier in the video, the developers made the right call on going back to what worked before. Yeah, compared to other games and their mechanics, Ace Combat 7 does feel a little basic. But after back-to-back misses, Ace Combat needed to take that step back and return to its roots. Now that Ace Combat has proven that it still has a place in the video game space today, this is when innovations and new ideas can start being added. Of course, said ideas need to have a limit to them. I never want to see something like dogfight mode from Assault Horizon ever again. But as long as the core identity of Ace Combat remains intact, shoot, try some things out. I'm looking forward to what Ace Combat 8 will bring, and where the Ace Combat series as a whole will go from here in the coming years.
I salute the pilot who gave us all a future.
Oh, but we're not done just yet. There's one more part before this video and the retrospective series as a whole comes to an end. 3 years ago is when I first began this Ace Combat retrospective journey. I started with Ace Combat 3 instead of Air Combat, funnily enough, but I circled back around to Air Combat and Ace Combat 2 before moving on to the other ones. In those 3 years, my love of this franchise has grown to new heights. I was merely just experiencing Ace Combat before these retrospectives. I had my favorite games and I loved the series as a whole back then, of course, but I had no idea how much Ace Combat had gone through in terms of its changes, innovations, controversies, its low points, all of that. Nowadays, I'm not just experiencing Ace Combat, I consider myself to be fully immersed in it. Out of everything that Ace Combat has done, not just for me, but for its player base as a whole, the number one thing that sticks out to me is how we've all been able to be ace pilots. We've all had the honor of being unstoppable beasts in these games. We've liberated countries, stopped mass murder plots, put an end to wars, and above all else, got to be aces. Someone like me who loves aviation and flying but probably won't be a pilot in real life because I don't have the brains for it, loves the fact a franchise like Ace Combat exists. And in this oppressive world of being told we're nobodies and that we have to conform and all be the same, having an opportunity to be someone special, even if in a video game and for just a moment, is special. Ace Combat takes what we all imagine aerial warfare to be like in our minds and makes it a reality. In real life, pilots aren't getting up in each other's faces in a massive furball, performing tunnel runs, doing colbits to get on someone's six, things like that. All of that sounds cool, but it just ain't happening. Ace Combat looks at all of that cool stuff and goes, but what if that all did happen? Not only does Ace Combat allow me to be a pilot for a little bit, even if it's through a video game and not real life, it also allows me to be someone special, even if it's through a video game and not real life. That passion for aviation coupled with us being heroes as these ace pilots is a combo that can't be beat. My life wouldn't be the same without Ace Combat. If I hadn't downloaded that demo of Ace Combat 6 on my Xbox 360 all those years ago, I don't know where I'd be in life right now. I'm sure I'd still have a favorite video game franchise, and I'd probably be making a retrospective series on that instead of Ace Combat in this alternate timeline I'm talking about. But even then, my life wouldn't be the same. Before this video and the retrospective series as a whole concludes, I want to give out some thanks. Thank you for watching this video. Whether you watched every retrospective along the way, or if this is your first retrospective of mine that you're watching, it means a lot that you're choosing to spend some of your free time with me. And thank you to the developers at Project Aces for making what is, in my eyes, the best video game series ever. Yeah, I'm without question biased when calling it the best, but I don't care. Here's to many more years of Ace Combat.
Tu te souviens de nos fleurs préférées qui chantaient tout près de nous, du jour de ta déclaration d'amour, les mains pleines de pensées, plus même dans ton dos pleura, et plus tu as pleuré dans mes bras. Et un moment de silence, puis pour faire nous